everybody. Thank you very much for coming. If this is your second session, welcome back. And if you're joining us for the first time, thanks for coming. Today's session is observing during interactions. When we met the last time, those of you who were with us, we talked about observing as a way to build relationships. And as I put together today's presentation, I thought a lot about many of the challenges of being a teacher of young children. And for those of you that are on the call that actually work every day with kids, once again, and as I always do, I want to honor the hard work that you do because it is just truly extraordinary. And the more I think about what the work of teaching young children is, the more I recognize the complexity of it. So as we think today about our practice, the work that we do as educators, I want to invite everybody to do something that I frequently say at the beginning of a workshop, which is take your shoulders out of your ears and just kind of relax and not think about doing this these interactions as something more to do, but rather that if you look at Jessica's face as she interacts with Magdalena on the slide that's up on your screen right now, you see joy in both of their faces. And I think that what I'd like to invite you to think about is how to use assessment and observation as something to enhance the quality and the satisfaction of teaching and not something that's a burden. So, and I will apologize up front. You will have a handout available to you. There's always the risk that sometimes some of the words fall off a webinar screen. So I'm going to begin talking about the importance of teacher-child interactions. And many of you are familiar with my work and know that when I talk about teacher-child interactions, I always cite three bodies of research that are pivotal. Lev Vygotsky is so important for us to reference because he didn't talk about interactions last Thursday or even 5 years ago, but at the turn of the last century, he was one of the first learning theorists to say that the connection between interactions and learning for humans is vital. Yesterday, I just spent 4 days up until about 10 minutes ago working with a group of women from Bangladesh, and we were talking about how when you put your ideas outside of your mouth, outside of your head, you clarify your thinking, and that's so much about what Vygotsky talked about. So for young children, as we look at the picture of Tyrone in the floor of his first grade classroom with his teacher beside him, as he talks about what he's doing, he's clarifying his thinking. The National Scientific Council on the Developing Child at Harvard continues to inform us about how relationships affect virtually all aspects of children's development. And again, referencing the last 4 days for me, the work I did last week in Connecticut, as I built relationships with the people that I was working with, all of whom were adults, the closer we got, the more we all were able to grow and learn. And then the work of Hamre and Pianta and others have talked about the quality of classroom interactions moderating the risk of school failure. So with that as our background research, let's explore how we can ensure that these interactions between teachers and children are more poignant, more intentional by using observation and assessment as the guide. So when we look at Miss Maggie in this slide and we see how she's talking with the child about the insect that they're drawing, I want you all to have the frame of reference that assessment and intentional interactions go hand in hand. Why? Well, because Monroe tells us that the greatest opportunity for learning lies in moments of teacher-child interaction when the teacher crafts learning experiences that stretch children just beyond their current skill level. And, of course, that references Vygotsky's work about the zone of proximal development. And so when we look at this picture, notice that the teacher is just behind the child. She's not directing what this child is doing. The child's hands are on the work, but she's there behind him, in relationship with him, at his eye level, watching, observing, listening for that moment when he needs just a little bit of coaching to stretch his thinking just a little bit. Perhaps it's to compose shapes by putting two triangles together to make a square. Or in this picture where Miss Dana is looking at a first grader. Notice the connection that's happening there. That, yes, they're connected. And in that spirit of connection, that child is open to the learning that Miss Dana can offer. However, research finds that interactions in which teachers intentionally promote learning are few and far between. And that's the work of Early and his colleagues in 2005 and Pianta in 2010. So let's just unpack that research for a moment. What we know from research is that many teachers of young children are what I call good relationshipers. They know how to connect with kids, but knowing how to connect with kids and join children and make the right decision about how to stretch a child's learning is not an easy task. We now know, particularly through the work of class, that there are a myriad of strategies for instructional support, but knowing how to choose the right strategy, fit the child in the spirit of that connection, is what requires careful observation. So you may recognize this assessment cycle from our last session, or for those of you familiar with work sampling, you've certainly seen it before. This is the assessment cycle. Intentional interactions are guided by the assessment cycle. And just to review, the assessment cycle means that in any given interaction where we're assessing, we begin with an open mind by asking questions. We collect evidence to help us to answer our questions. Then we have to make meaning of our evidence. And finally, we take action. Within an intentional interaction, all four of those steps are happening. So when you join a child or plan an experience, you know the goals that are inherent in that experience. For example, in blocks, children are likely to solve problems, make choices, experiment with size, shape, balance. In this moment of reading, you know that your goals are to help a child develop concepts of print, the association between pictures and words, to begin to recognize the spaces between words. So some of your questions are going to be about those specific goals. And the evidence that you collect will answer those questions. But as we go through this session, there's also the issue of staying open, of being curious, and of allowing yourself to find answers to questions that you may not have even known you had. I've referred now in this session so far to intentional interactions. And so you know that we refer to intentional interactions as powerful interactions. Notice in this picture, Lindsay, a teacher of 3s. Notice how she's at the child's eye level. Notice how much power that 3-year-old has as she tells Lindsay whatever it is that she wants to say. In a powerful interaction, the teacher intentionally connects. That means intentionally thinks about the relationship that they have with a child in order to extend that child's learning. So I want you to close your eyes for a minute and visualize joining a child. Do you start by saying hello, or do you start by asking the child a question? That child needs you to spark the chemistry that we talked about in the last session, the chemistry of the relationship, to make that relationship right there in the forefront of that child's thinking so that the child opens to you. Lindsay might say, "Hi, Daria. I noticed that you've come over to talk with me. What's on your mind?" Just by saying the child's name, having a smile on your face, getting down at the child's eye level, that's how we form that connection. When we talk about powerful interactions, we talk about 3 steps. Step 1, be present. Notice Miss Pat's eyes. She isn't even in the interaction yet. She's begun to observe. She's begun to wonder, what do I know about JoJo? And JoJo's at the sand table, so she says, what's possible for JoJo to be thinking about and learning as he's engaged in the sand table? Notice in step 2, connect. Their eyes are on each other. That's the relationship step of a powerful interaction. And then in step 3, their eyes are on the work. That's the extend learning strategy step. That's where, as Monroe would say, it's the perfect opportunity to just stretch the child's learning a little bit. So in step 1, as Miss Pat observes JoJo, she allows herself to pause and prepare. This often ignored but highly important step is about self-awareness. It's about saying, is there so much noise in my head right now that I couldn't even begin to settle in with JoJo? What do I know about JoJo? What interests him? What's he likely to be doing at the sand table? What do I know about learning at the sand table? What are the possible objectives that I might think about? Oh, well, there's texture, there's weight, there's motion. He might be using a dump truck. You want to give yourself that 20 seconds, that luxury of pausing to be an observer, to get in a frame of mind that lets you be open to learning about the child. In step 1, I've begun to talk about what my friend Margot Dichtel-Miller refers to as a stance of persistent curiosity. Let's look at Miss Maggie as she joins this child in the block area. That little gray bubble is not what she's saying. It's what she's thinking in her own mind as she's in step 1. She's saying, what do I know about Sherelle? And what can I learn about her in this setting? What is she investigating? So the cycle of assessment that begins with questions, with wondering, with being curious, is always saying, what can I use about what I know about this child to help me stretch this child's learning? Now let's think about step 2. Step 2 is about making a personal connection, letting the child know that you see her, are interested in what she's doing, and that you want to spend time with her. So now I've made Miss Maggie's balloon coming out of her head not a thought balloon, but rather a talk balloon. And notice that to connect, she uses the child's name. Hi, Sherelle. May I join you? How civilized is that? And Sherelle responds, sure, I'm building ramps like we did yesterday. I'm going to go back for a minute. I'm going to try anyway, yeah. And I'm going to say, how often as a teacher do we join a child and say, tell me about what you're doing, rather than, may I join you? And instead of you having to say, tell me about what you're doing, Sherelle just volunteers it. She says, I'm building ramps like we did yesterday. When you when you ask the child permission to join, and then you wait to see how or if the child accepts your invitation to connect, you're slowing down. You're allowing wait time. I want to tell a brief story about visiting a teacher in Arizona, and she went to join a child, and she did all the right things. She got down at the child's eye level. She said hello. The child didn't look up. She didn't ask if she could join the child, but she went on to ask the child a question about his work. He still didn't look up. So I kind of gestured to her to come over and talk to me, and I said, go back and whisper in his ear, is what you're working on a secret? He looked at me a little strangely, but she went back to the child and she whispered in his ear, is what you're working on a secret? And lo and behold, she got a big response. He nodded his head yes with gusto. So she now has assessment information, which is he listens and responds appropriately. Whereas before, by just starting to talk to him, she didn't get a response. Lo and behold, she said, oh, well, if it's a secret, I'll go away. As she left, he followed her with his eyes, and just a few minutes later, he came over to show her what he had worked on. And what she said to me was that that was the most response that she'd ever gotten from him. So this connect step is vital. In the case of Sherelle, Miss Maggie knows that Sherelle's going to respond. But if this was a child who typically doesn't talk, or for whom you're not sure that you can be there and make that child comfortable, you tailor the question that you ask during Connect, or how you join the child, what you say and do. Perhaps you connect by simply saying, hi, and then just be there. And then we come to step 3, connect, step 3, extend learning. By asking permission to join and then waiting with curiosity and patience, the child often gives us our next clue. There again, we're observing in the interaction. In the case of Maggie, in this slide over here, Maggie might say, oh, yes, I remember, we did build yesterday. Or she might say, I see you've made 2 ramps, each at a different angle. Here, after Miss Odom says, I noticed that you've put the cars in a line, she then asks an open-ended question to encourage the child's engagement in learning. She says, are they heading somewhere? And then she pauses again, giving Kimani time to respond. So in this powerful interaction, 3 steps. Observing happens in step 1 to recall what you know about the child and to get into the place of where that child is working. In step 2, connect, you're using what you know about the child to make sure that your connection is individualized, is personalized. And then you're using the connect as a way to further observe and discover how the child responds and whether that child even wants you to be with her. In step 3, extend, it's not like you're done being present. You have to stay present so that you can continue to observe to make this interaction an ongoing back and forth exchange. So I'm now going to show you something from last week at a preschool that I visited in Bristol, Connecticut. And I changed the scenario just a little bit, but by and large, it's as I saw it. So in the forefront of the picture, you see Kristen, and Kristen is interacting with Ryan. But I want you to look in the back of the picture. You barely see Miss Meghan in her pink shirt. She's standing outside of the dramatic play area, and she's observing. She's saying, with her stance of curiosity, in her cycle of assessment, she's saying, what's happening here? She says. Tajuan is looking frustrated. She asks herself the be-present questions. Can I quiet my static and find the just right fit for Tajuan? She knows that Tajuan, when frustrated, can get angry. And so she decides to stay calm and help him see that he can work out whatever his problem is. Slow and calm, Meghan said. That's what works with Tajuan. So this is Tajuan in the back. And what's happening in this picture is that these kids, Tajuan had sort of taken over, but the kids were trying to make a tent by spreading fabric across two chairs. Meghan joins the children, and she's still thinking. She says, how can I help him see the problem so that he can solve it? And Meghan says, I see you've moved the chairs away from the table, and you have a blanket. I'm going to watch and learn about your plan. Tajuan says, we're making a cave, but we can't get a roof. Another child says, the blanket keeps falling down. She pauses to think, I've got to frame the problem. So she says, Tajuan wants to get the blanket to stay attached to the chair. And now she invites the kids to be problem solvers. What could we use, Meghan says. By Meghan framing the problem for the children, she's making the problem visible. That's using observation to scaffold learning in the most beautiful way. She's moving the kids towards analysis and reasoning. Tajuan says, yeah, it just keeps doing it. So Meghan says, let's think about ideas. We want to get the blanket to stay. The kids begin to brainstorm. They go back and forth. They have a bunch of different ideas. Somebody says nails. Somebody else says, nails was one, and the other one said glue. And Meghan said, yes, we could use nails or glue, but if we do that, what's going to happen to the chair? So yet again, she's helping the kids think and problem solve. And then she says to herself, I need to give them a cue. I want them to keep brainstorming. So she says, let's think about when we hang laundry outside, connecting to experiences that they may have had, or when we hang our paintings to dry in the classroom, and all together the kids yell, clothespins. And then somebody says, or we could use tape. And so Tajuan runs to get the tape, and together they work out solving this problem. This is an example of Meghan working with a small group, scaffolding in particular Tajuan to manage his frustration. And that interaction not only proved to help the children be successful, but she extended vocabulary, she helped them think about concepts, and she helped them all to be successful problem solvers using a variety of different strategies. During that interaction, frankly, I was pretty impressed at how Meghan was juggling the balls. But right afterward, she quickly jotted down her observation of Tajuan. He says, Tajuan couldn't get the roof to stay on cave, expressed frustration. We're making a cave, but we can't get a roof. We see his language there. I described problem with blanket sagging. He and others generated ideas. Tajuan said nails but changed his mind. Tajuan suggested clothespins with prompt. Ariel said tape. Tay recalled the pink hopscotch tape and got it. And then later in the day, she interprets her evidence more formally by linking it to work sampling performance indicators. 1C2, attends to tasks and seeks help when encountering a problem. I think you would all agree, if you were sitting in the room with me, that we have evidence that that happened. Remember, when we document our evidence and when we link evidence to indicators, it doesn't mean that the child is proficient. It just means that this observation note gives us evidence of how this child is doing in relation to that indicator. 1C3, approaches tasks with flexibility and inventiveness. I'd say they tried trial and error. They tried thinking about glue. They thought about nails. When the teacher prompted them to think further, they went for it. 1D1, interacts easily with one or more children. Absolutely. 2A1, gains meaning by listening. 4B1, explores the properties of objects and materials and how they change. Now, I have a feeling that many of you are saying, but wait a second, there's even more indicators. What about language? He used language. What about the fact that he interacted with the adult? You're absolutely right. Quite honestly, there's always more indicators that you can link. But what I wanted to model here is that if one observation note gives you evidence of 5 indicators, you have gotten a big bang for your buck. I'm sorry, I clicked the wrong button. So in this last couple of slides, when I talked about Miss Odom and when I talked about Miss Maggie and even when I talked about Meghan, I referred to an extend strategy that we call mirror talk. Mirror talk serves many purposes, one of them being that it forces us to be observers. So when we use mirror talk, like, oh, I notice you've made a collection of Unifix cubes alternating red and pink, we're giving children specific detailed information about what they are doing and saying. Many times teachers say to me, but why don't I want to hear the child say that? And I think about the research on vocabulary and how children need to hear 30 million words. And if we start every interaction by asking children for something rather than giving them language, we are doing them a disservice. Second, when we use mirror talk and we describe what children are doing, we raise children's awareness of their own actions, their words, their thinking, and their learning. Third, when we describe what children are doing, we're encouraging them to repeat and practice those learning behaviors. Finally, we're leading children to new language and new vocabulary. And then finally, we are helping ourselves, the teacher, observe what children are doing. I'm going to pause. I'm going to do one more slide, and then I'm going to pause to see if there are any questions. So let's look at Rosie, and many of you who know me may have seen Rosie before. So I come over to the easel and I join Rosie, and I say, hi, Rosie, may I join you? She nods, and I say, Rosie, I see that you are layering red paint on top of the brown paint. I might say, oh, Rosie, I see that you are pressing the brush onto the paper to make wide, thick brush strokes. I am gifting the child language. Okay, Sherry, I'm going to pause here, and if there are questions that have come in, will you please let me know what they are?
Hi, Judy. Could you please repeat what NSCDC stands for?
Absolutely. The National Council on Scientific Development, and if you go to harvard.edu, you'll get there.
Okay. I have children with oppositional behavior in my classroom. If they say no when I ask, do I walk away or come back and watch and try again?
Well, my first suggestion would be to not invite a no, but to say something like, is what you're working on a secret? Because that's likely to get a yes, or you have a choice. I'd love to visit with you. Would you like me to be here now, or should I come back later? So if I just set up the situation for the child to say no, the chances are I'm going to get a no. But if I give the child a choice, which if you think about what's oppositional behavior is needing some power and control. So if I give that power and control in a constructive way, then I'm helping the child to experience the power without having to be oppositional. I hope that was helpful.
When creating anecdotal notes, how important is it to include the task numbers?
By task numbers, do you mean work sampling performance indicators? I'm not sure I understand the question. How about if the person who phrased that question could rephrase it in another way, and then later when I pause again, I'll answer it because I don't understand the question. So, Sherry, can you go on?
What if choices are offered, but the child responds by saying, no, I can't?
Well, I'm going to suggest that that person get in touch with me on my email because in some ways, every child wants attention. And children who demonstrate challenging behavior with oppositional behavior typically need a strategy that's going to help to break the ice. So, if the child says no, I'm going to say, I heard you say no, and I'm going to respect that. Later, when I come back, I'm going to need to spend 2 minutes with you, so you can prepare yourself for that. You know, like, I love when my friend Elizabeth Servideo says to kids, you know, this is school, and sometimes in school there are things that we don't want to do. Sometimes you have a choice, and sometimes I make the choice. So this is a larger question, and what our session is about is really observing during interactions. I'm happy to keep helping, but I think perhaps I should have that as a little chat with that person, or perhaps put it in a Q&A. Sarah, can we go on?
Yep. How would these steps work with a nonverbal child?
Beautifully, as long as the teacher is willing to look for visual cues and nonverbal cues. For example, if I say to a child, would you like me, show me with your head, would you like me to join you? Nod yes or no. You know, so I really want to invite children to use visual cues, and I want to quiet my need for language. Next question.
Yep. When the creating anecdotal notes question, she's asking about the work sampling indicator numbers.
I'm a big believer of putting work sampling indicator numbers on your observations because I think it makes entering data into the online system just much more quick. And similarly, if I actually use an observation as part of a family conference, I want to be able to reference it, but that's a matter of choice. Thanks for that clarification.
Should we explain to a child? Oh, I'm sorry. One more?
Yeah, one more.
Should we explain to a child when we need to go to another child who needs your help right then?
Okay, that's a great question. So when we come to near the end of the presentation, I'm going to talk about powerful interactions and about how many you can realistically have in a day. So one of the things that we have to always remember about children is that unless we teach them, they can't learn it. So if you have kids in the room who really hog your attention, it's pivotal to have a circle time discussion in which you say, you know, boys and girls, myself and Miss So-and-so, if you have a team teaching situation, or, you know, I can be with one of you at a time when I'm having a one-on-one conversation or in a small group. Let's think about all the other people who can help you in the room when you have something that you want to say. And that's one thing. And then when I'm interacting with you, sometimes I'm going to say, you know, now I need to move on, and I'll come back and check in with you. I think for kids who are very needy and who want you to be with them, it's so important to say, thank you for letting me spend time with you. I'll come back and check in 10 minutes. In the video that we have on our Powerful Interactions website, there's a wonderful moment where Miss Odom says to a group in dramatic play, could you do me a favor? Heat up the toast for about 10 minutes and I'll come back. So it's not that you're leaving the children, but you're leaving the children with a job to do. Or, I'm so curious to see how tall you can make your block structure. See if you can add at least 20 more blocks, and then I'll be back to see how you're doing. And children don't want you to leave because they're enjoying your company, but if you give them a challenge and you remind them that you'll be back, typically that works. Okay, I'm going to move on, and then we'll take another round of questions in a little while. Okay, so very often, let's remember that what we're talking about is observing during interactions. And sometimes interactions are one-on-one, and sometimes, as they were with Meghan in dramatic play, it's a small group, but the small group is a spontaneous small group. In this kindergarten setting, Miss Maggie is interacting with a small group that she set up. It's a literacy experience. And you'll notice in the photo on the bottom, the task is to find a picture, build the word using the letters that are in the center of the table, and then use a marker to write the word. So that's the small group of activity. Over here, you see her clipboard. She's observing and documenting what the children are doing. So when Miss Maggie plans this lesson, she's thinking about very specific goals. They're going to build words. They're going to practice writing. They're going to think about initial sounds. They're going to think about vowel recognition. But let's think about the assessment cycle. Let's think about the stance of persistent curiosity. Let's think about powerful interaction. Even though she has a clear agenda for this lesson, she still has to pause and quiet the static in step one before she joins the small group to say, what can I learn about these children? So rather than sitting down and just getting right into the task, she greets each child by name to connect. And she says, how's everybody doing? And they answer. So she's modeling for them social conventions, how to be in a small group. And then she says, you know, we're going to play this letter game. Who remembers playing this game before? And the child in the red shirt remembers something, and she says, let's just look at the parts and see if you can figure out what the directions are. Well, sure enough, just by posing that open-ended question, for the most part, the children could show her their problem-solving ability. Somebody said, well, there are 3 lines across, so I bet we have to do 3 things. Somebody else said, there's pictures, so they started to take pictures. The child in the striped shirt said, do we have to build the words? So she wasn't in a hurry to get down to business. She was eager to let the children teach her. And she continues to learn about the children, not just in relation to literacy, but overall. How are they interacting with each other? How are they interacting with her? How are they using language? How are they connecting this experience to other experiences that they've had? You'll remember that when I began the webinar, I said that putting this session together built even more than it always does, my appreciation for the hard work that teachers do. And I would say that my motto for this session is that when we observe during interaction, what we want to do is slow down, watch and listen to learn the child's agenda. So much is going on in any classroom. There are so many balls to juggle. But the question to keep asking ourselves is, how can we listen for what children teach us about what they know and can do? So that led me to look through slides and send out some requests from many of the teachers that I know who make their lives a little easier by posting things in various parts of the room so that they don't have to keep so much in their head. They don't have to juggle so much. In this classroom, the teacher has a sign beautifully posted on top of the block shelves and in a plastic frame. What does that do? Well, certainly it helps her. A quick glance as she's joining children in the block center reminds her of the learning that's possible there. So during her pause to be present, she glances at that, and it gets her into the frame of mind for the block center. Obviously, it also helps parents know what children are learning or other adults who might join into the room. In this classroom, actually it's the same room, here it is in the writing center. Other teachers post open-ended questions in centers, sometimes at the child's eye level and sometimes high up, so that they just aren't trying to figure out what to say and do as they extend children's learning. These I recently noted in a classroom. What are you working on? Tell me about. What are your plans for those materials? What could you use this for? What could you do if that were? What would you do if that were you? Why do you think that happened? How can I help you solve this? I'm wondering, how do you do that? So after using mirror talk, we're always thinking about what question we might pose. So having questions already there helps you not to have to think about so many things, keep so much in your head. So when we are using powerful interaction, pausing to be present, connecting in step 2, and then moving into step 3, we always want to observe to assist us. Can we use mirror talk as feedback to describe, validate, or demonstrate vocabulary? Might we offer a suggestion, some information, or guidance? Might we extend learning by modeling a new skill or strategy? Might we introduce a new material, a book, or a vocabulary word? Or would we use an open-ended question to encourage the child to describe, explain, predict, compare, or contrast? One of the things that I like to remind people of is that knowing children and using what we know about children helps us to individualize questions. Always want to link our questions to the child's agenda, not to our agenda. If a child has their hand in the water, it makes sense to say, how does the water feel? To say, oh, here's a measuring cup, let's scoop. The child's not there yet. We want to match our questions to the child's cognitive development. And we always want to provide the right amount of scaffolding. And in all three of those ways of individualizing, we've got to stay pausing to be present so that we can be observers. Another important piece of observing during interaction is being ready to document this and saying to children, I don't want to forget this. I'm going to write it down. In this case, Zariah was playing a matching game, and this teacher just captured the back and forth interaction. For that teacher or person who asked me about, do you have to write the code, you can see that this teacher didn't. She scanned this in to work sampling online, and she linked the indicators right online. So another way in which we can document the observations we have of children during interactions is in the displays that we make in the classroom. And so when in this classroom there was a beautiful bulletin board of what makes you feel happy, there was a picture of kids smiling and dictation of what they said. And then at the bottom it said that from the guidelines, begins to identify feelings and respond to those of others, and represents ideas and stories through pictures, dictation, and play. And I decided to put this into this presentation because even though it's about displays, it lets us know that the interactions we're having with children, we're being observers, and it helps others to understand what we're observing for. Or in this one, this was a display along from Goodwin. This was a display along the bottom where kids are putting their shoes on, and it was a beautiful display showing how children help each other with their boots and with their shoes. And adjacent to it were the work sampling system guidelines about personal and social development and interaction with others. This one comes from a school in Brooklyn, and it was a display on the front of the cabinet, and it's a little hard to see on the PowerPoint, but there's so much happening here that conveys to children that we're observing them, we're interested in them, we want to know what they're thinking, and we want to document their learning. And I included this because it's an exquisite example of teacher as observer and documenter of children's thinking and learning. This is the slide I referenced earlier. So in a group of 20 children, a powerful interaction with each child by the end of the week is a gift to that child. So in any given day, if you can have 4 intentional interactions, each for 3 to 5 minutes, in which you let yourself have the gift of asking questions, of being curious, of learning from kids, what a gift you've given them. Work as a team, plan and organize. Create a system that's manageable for you. And then another teacher, I don't think you can see the bottom slide. So at the bottom of this, I decided to help people think about assessment as a bridge over like a set of stepping stones that cross a river. that when you first start out, you're trying out different methods of documenting. As you go a little further, you're seeking habits that work. And then, as you get to the other side of the river, you've got assessment integrated naturally into your everyday routine, and you can observe and interact and have a stance of curiosity as a very natural part of your everyday teaching. I'm going to pause now and let Sherry ask a few more questions before we wrap up.
Do you have a suggestion on how to observe when the students are immediately asking the teacher to join in the play?
You're observing as you're playing, just like Meghan did. You know, you're not necessarily documenting, but you're joining in the play, but you're not taking a leadership role. You're being more kind of a participant observer. It means quieting your tendency to take over.
How would you help the kids with separation anxiety?
Well, I'm not totally sure that fits with the topic of today's webinar. I would say that watching the child as the parent comes and making sure to have a powerful interaction with the parent and the child during arrival time is pivotal. So if you have a child with separation anxiety, I would say that planning with your assistant that you can be there and spend 3 to 5 minutes with that child and that parent to help that child, quieting your own static, talking with the parent about what makes that child comfortable, really emphasizing connect, and making your extend learning, taking that child's hand and say, before the parent leaves, let's go over to the table with the puzzles and sit here for a few. The next question.
How would you use these steps with ESL children?
Absolutely the same way. Children who are learning a second language, it fits with what we talked about before about paying attention to nonverbal cues. It means learning a few words in the child's home language, using a lot of gestures. The idea of intentional interactions means that you're pausing to be present so that the noise that comes into your head about not speaking the same language as the child gets quiet. And it allows you to think and make some decisions. Who can I partner this child with? What word do I remember in the child's home language? What gesture could I use? What picture could I point to?
Should an observation hit many points? In other words, how many points should there be for an effective observation hit?
It's a great question. I'm going to say that less than 2 or 3 typically means you're observing for a specific objective and you haven't allowed yourself to be curious about all the things that the child is teaching you. And if you start to go above 5 or 6, it means you're pushing hard to make everything fit. So somewhere between 3 and 6.
When do you?
But I don't want to be. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead and finish.
Well, I just don't. Sometimes when somebody says I have 7 indicators, and then someone else says, but Judy said you can't have more than 6. I mean, plenty of times I observe kids, and I end up with 7 or 8 indicators. A lot depends on what kids are doing and how long you're with them.
When do you put the why question in?
When it fits. A why question gets at inviting a child to explain their thinking. Why do you think that happened? In some cases, an explain question is not the question to ask. It might be a describe. Describe how you did this. Describe what's happening in your picture. Describe your favorite part of the book. So a why question may not be relevant to that situation. I think that's part of what you're observing for, to decide, is this a time that you want the child to explain something, in which case a why question would be relevant.
And then we have one more. Would it be okay to use the work sampling system domains instead of numbers?
Well, the domains don't give you enough information. Part of interpreting evidence in step 3 is really finding out whether your evidence gives you information about specific performance indicators. But there again, if you're going to enter your documentation online and you just sort of want to do it quickly, just to put the domain so that you know where to look and get a sense of what you're paying attention to and what you still need to pay attention to, I could see that could work as well.
And there are no more questions at this time.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm looking forward to the third in our series. If you haven't checked out the Early Childhood Summer Institute that Pearson is hosting, please check the website for that. Please be sure to like me on Facebook. My blog is at judyjablon.com. And we always have posts about different things that we're learning from the field at our Powerful Interactions Facebook page. Right now, our Powerful Interactions website is underway, but we're hoping to have a blog launched for that website in May. Once again, thank you, Sherry. Thank you, Leslie. And thanks to Pearson. Bye, everyone.
And that concludes our webinar. Thank you.